Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of insight into the midfield that I've only come across myself the last couple of days, which I find interesting because I was finding it difficult to understand really why there is such a hard desire to bring in a defensive midfielder and potentially Declan Rice. So from what I'm told, Lampard and Chelsea are extremely happy with the talent they have in midfield, but they feel in that centre position and particularly defensively, the mix hasn't been quite right. So, for instance, Kovacic and Jorginho, Kovacic had a great season last season, but I think there's a feeling that the two of them, when they're playing the three together, don't actually bring out the best in each other defensively. I think they think that when Kovacic and Jorginho are in the same team, it leaves holes. Similarly, I think the difficulty with Kovacic and Kante becomes is that they're both very quiet. So while very talented, I don't think there's a lot of talking in there. And I definitely have noticed that since restart. It's very interesting being able to watch matches with no crowd. And I was astonished at how quiet Chelsea were. I mean, funnily enough, Kepa's quite vocal. And Azpilicueta and Rudiger can be vocal, but certainly in the midfield, very, very quiet. So I think they want to get the mix right, and I think they feel that the mix going forward is good, but the mix defensively is not quite right in that midfield, and they need someone who they feel can come in and provide a partner. I know they don't play in a two, but almost provide a partner to either a Kante or a Kovacic who can just solidify things and make them a bit tactically better when not in possession. So I believe that's where the desire comes. They think Declan Rice can definitely fulfil that role. I think there are other people that they're looking at too. Sumare is one that Frank actually admitted last season that he liked. Brozovic at Inter Milan, I think, has been looked at before. So there are others, but regardless of the names, they're very keen to get someone who tactically they feel can fit in to what Frank wants to do forward, but also for when they're not in possession and they don't quite feel with the people they have there that they have that option at the moment.
You know, we did see N'Golo Kante shift back into that position at some points later in the season. Is he being viewed as an option for that spot, or do you think the way that they're looking at the midfield construction is that they don't view N'Golo Kante fulfilling that defensive midfielder role for the season ahead?
Yeah, I think. Look, I think they are looking at him for that. He did well when he was put back there after the restart, and I just think that they don't feel they've quite got the right mix around him. The other problem you do have with Kante at the moment, which I know is an issue, is that we've now had 2 seasons where he's had quite a lot of injury problems, and he's 29, and I don't think, given the last 2 seasons, that you can take the risk of going into a season thinking that you can get a full season out of Kante without any layoffs, because just through maybe overplaying for 3 or 4 years before that, and both for France and for Leicester and then Chelsea, I think there is a fear that he's always going to have slight fitness issues. And I also think the club are aware of the fact that is slightly their fault, because they have pushed. I mean, Sarri in his last year to get that Europa League win, I mean, quite frankly, was reckless with his fitness, and it set Kante back a lot. I mean, it got Sarri what he needed. They got their league position and they got Europa League, but it set Kante back quite a long way. And I think there's also a recognition at the club that they can't keep asking Kante to do that because his body will break down.
So do you see the season ahead for Kante to be one more filled with rotation? And if so, then that kind of answers the question of how Declan Rice fits into the mix, right?
Yeah, I mean, it will depend on whether Chelsea can get in Declan Rice or someone else. I mean, if they can't, Kante to start with will have to play a lot of games, but I think they will be and have been more careful with him than certainly they were in the Sarri years and maybe the Kante years, where he was just asked to play. You know, if he was 50% fit, he was asked to play. It's a difficult one. If they signed Rice or another one, I obviously don't quite know how it would work out, but clearly Frank has a plan for that. The interesting thing with Rice obviously, is that because he can play in defence as well, and even though they've signed Thiago Silva, I know the next phase of the plan, if they get a defensive midfielder in for this window, is to then in future windows start looking towards getting a dominant centre-back.
Right.
Thiago Silva gives them a bit of a stopgap, but Rice coming in would almost, give them an option in both of those places and potentially mean they don't actually have to sign two players. They can just sign one player.
So is your thought then that if it's looking like Rice isn't going to come in, that they will make a quick move to try to pick up like Somare or Brozovic from Inter? Do you kind of think that is they'll give Rice a good 2 or 3 weeks, and if not, we'll see a pretty quick move to land one of those two players as a immediate fix for the coming season? Possibly,
because I do think that Frank is very keen. I think he's worried about the pressure it puts his defence under, particularly with him signing almost kind of a stopgap in Thiago. Thiago Silva's a great player, but he's 36 or so. He's clearly a stopgap. So I think there's a good chance that if they couldn't get Rice, he will look elsewhere rather than just hold out for Rice, because I think he is concerned that without sorting out this midfield mix, that it will continue to cost them. But as I say, because Rice can fulfill two positions, that wouldn't at all mean that they couldn't go for Rice in the future.
A quick follow on N'Golo Kante, because I think there's been some reporting, some rumors out there that Chelsea could look to potentially sell him. Are you seeing any of that on your end?
Frank's been very clear that he doesn't want to sell Kante publicly, and Frank's usually pretty straight on the record. He's quite an open book to read when he talks about transfers. But part of me, I've heard little whispers that potentially were something to come up that Kante fancied and were the money right, then it would provoke a discussion, because he's 29, because of his injury problems, because they did a contract with him that made him probably one of the highest earners at the club, if not the highest earner at the club. I think there would be a discussion. I wouldn't fully. I'd be surprised still, but I wouldn't fully rule it out.